let's read some of George Washington's chapter. Born George Washington, born 1789, George Washington, that's his presidential term, 1789 to 1797. Born in Wakefield, Pope's Creek, Westmoreland County, Virginia. (1731) or 32. George Washington's portraits do not do him justice. The prim, thin-lipped, humourless expression with which he gazes out at the world, although to some extent indicative of his nature, was probably occasioned more by his ill-fitting false teeth than by any other cause. On the other hand, his wife Martha looks a motherly soul, but one who would certainly stand no nonsense. Of all America's presidents to date, George Washington possesses the most illustrious lineage. His male line ancestry can be traced back with certainty to William de Washington, who was granted the manor of Washington near Sunderland in County Durham by Hugh de Puiset, Bishop of Durham, in about 1180, in exchange for the manor of Hartburn in the parish of Stockton, which he had formerly held. Although documentary proof is lacking, William's father was, in all probability, Patrick Dolphin, alias Patrick Fitz-Dolphin, son of Dolphin Fitz-Uchtred, Lord of Araby, who had a grant of Staindrop from the Prior of Durham in 1131. Dolphin's father, Uchtred, had been identified with an Uchtred mentioned in 1116, who was son of Maldred, younger son of Maldred, the brother of King Duncan I of Scotland, brackets, Macbeth's victim, close brackets. Duncan and Maldred were the sons of Crinan Thane, hereditary abbot of Dunkeld, who was the kin of St Columba and lineally descended from Niall of the 9 hostages who reigned in Ireland in the first half of the 5th century AD. If this descent is correct, the Washingtons possess a male line pedigree in common with the O'Neills and the Nevilles, as old as any in Europe. George Washington, of course, would have been quite unaware of all of this and would probably have been unimpressed by it had he been aware. He knew that his family was one of respectable gentry before his great-grandfather, Colonel John Washington, emigrated to Virginia in 1656 and settled in Westmoreland County, where he acquired over 6,000 acres of land. He commanded the Virginia forces in the Indian War of 1675 and represented Westmoreland County in the House of Burgesses. John's son Lawrence also sat in the House of Burgesses, and married a lady whose background was equally as aristocratic as his. Mildred Warner was the daughter of a Speaker of the Virginia House of Burgesses, and through her mother, Mildred Reed, a descendant of the Demoux, hereditary champions of England, whose office it was to challenge any man to dispute the sovereign's right to the throne at England coronation banquets. It is one of the ironies of history that George Washington should descend from the It is one of the ironies of history that George Washington should descend from these staunch supporters of the English crown. Lawrence Washington's younger son, Augustine, received the estate of Epsawasson by transfer from his sister Mildred, to whom it had been bequeathed by their father in 1726. Later renamed Mount Vernon, it was to become famous as George Washington's favourite residence, where he died and was buried. Augustine Washington, having lost his first wife, Jane Butler, in 1729, married again in 1731 to Mary Ball, the daughter of a neighbouring landowner, and their first child, but his fifth, George, was born at his house at Pope's Creek on the southern bank of the Potomac River on the 22nd of February 1732, or the 11th of February, either 1731 or 1732, by old style reckoning, then still in use in England and its colonies. The house where the birth took place, later named Wakefield, was to be destroyed by fire on Christmas Day 1779. A little over 100 years later, in 1882, its site was made over to the United States by the Washington heirs and the state of Virginia, and the Wakefield National Memorial Association painstakingly restored the house and grounds with authorization of Congress. No records or paintings existed of the original house, so a typical Virginian plantation house of the period was erected and inaugurated as the George Washington Birthplace National Monument. It is now a great tourist attraction. Almost nothing is known of George Washington's childhood and education. The well-known story of his cutting down his father's favourite cherry tree and confessing to so doing because he could not tell a lie is almost certainly apocryphal. He was, at any rate, only 11 years old when his father died, at the early age of 48 or 49 in April 1743. 5 years later, at the age of 16, George joined a surveying party to chart the western estate of Lord Fairfax beyond the Blue Ridge Mountains, and in the following year he received a surveyor's licence, the equivalent of a degree in engineering, from William and Mary College, and was appointed official surveyor of Culpeper County, Virginia. He practised as a surveyor for the next 3 years and acquired several thousand acres of land by purchase or inheritance by the time he was 21. From September 1751 until January 1752, he accompanied his half-brother Lawrence on a voyage to Barbados. It was to be his only trip outside America, and for a month in Barbados he was ill with smallpox. In November 1752, Washington received his first military appointment as District Adjutant of Virginia with the rank of Major from Governor Robert Dinwiddie. In March 1754, he was considered Commissioner Lieutenant Colonel in a Virginia regiment. And his first taste of active service came 2 months later when he defeated a French scouting party. His next task was to build Fort Necessity at Great Meadows, Pennsylvania, but he was immediately obliged to surrender it to a superior combined force of French soldiers and Indians. In November 1754, Washington resigned his commission when the Virginia regiment was divided into companies, and he was only offered the reduced rank of captain. The following May, however, he volunteered to join the staff of Major General Edward Braddock, commander of all British forces in America, and was appointed his ADC. The army was ambushed by the French and Indians near Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania, in July. Washington narrowly escaped being wounded after having 2 horses shot under him, and General Braddock was mortally wounded. In August, Washington was appointed Colonel and Commander-in-Chief of the Virginia Regiment. He held this appointment until December 1758, when he resigned his commission following his election to the Virginia House of Burgesses. On the 6th of January 1759, Washington married Mrs. Martha Custis, a young widow of 27, his senior by about 8 months. It was presumably a love match, but one cannot help feeling that George had decided that a wife was a necessary adjunct when his entry into politics, and chose the most suitable person to hand. There were to be no children of the marriage, although Martha had 4 children by her first husband. As both George and Martha were still in their 20s, their childlessness leads one to suppose that he may have been sterile. He proved a kinder stepfather to Martha's 2 surviving children, Jack and Patsy, and was later to be equally kind to Jack's orphaned children. In the month following his marriage, Washington took seat in the House of Burgesses at Williamsburg. He was to remain a member representing first Frederick County, then Fairfax County, until 1774, when he was chosen as one of 7 Virginia delegates to the First Continental Congress, which met at Philadelphia in September and October. In May 1775, Washington left Mount Vernon to attend the Second Continental Congress, little knowing that he was not to see his beloved home again for over 6 years. On the 16th of June, he accepted a commission as Commanding General of the Continental Army, becoming the first American general and taking command of the Continental Army at Cambridge, Massachusetts on the 3rd of July. The flag of the United Colonies, 13 alternating red and white stripes with the crosses of St. George and St. Andrew on a canton, was raised for the first time on the 1st of January 1776. The struggle for independence had begun, and for the next 7 years, Washington, serving without a salary, led his countrymen to victory until the Treaty of Peace signed in Paris on the 20th of January 1783 ended the hostilities. Washington family and George Washington's stepchildren. George Washington, it's here. It goes away back. This is George Washington's relationship to Sir Winston Churchill, the Prince and Princess of Wales, Queen Elizabeth II, and General Robert E. Lee. Washington. Through Colonel Augustine Warner, who was Washington's great-grandfather, comes down a line that comes to Elizabeth II, and then Charles, now King, off with even further back in this direction through this common ancestor. It is related to Winston Churchill, and also to Diana. This book came out in 1980.